Welcome to the Turn On Podcast. I'm the host Dakota Lachlan, and welcome back to today's little mini episode. I don't know what I think it's day 10 of the fast. I don't know what mini episode number this is. I lost track, but we're like it's crazy to think halfway through the fast almost. Technically, by tomorrow it'll be over halfway, and it went by so fast, but it's I'm pushing through. But anyway, today I'm probably gonna keep it short. I just wanted to touch on this verse that I kind of discovered a couple days ago, and I quite literally discovered it. I literally opened my Bible to a random spot one night, and I was like, I'll just go from there. And I opened up to this exact verse, and I was reading it, and I was like, that's such a cool verse, and I've been thinking about it literally for days. And it's in Job, so quite a random book that most people, including myself, probably wouldn't think there's much to get out of because you're just reading about whatever with Job's life. But really, it's a good book. Like every other book in the Bible, you should read them all. But I opened my Bible up to this page in Job 29 verse 4, and it says, "When I was in my prime, God's friendship was felt in my home." And I thought about that. I stood back. I was like, what a awesome, cool concept that is. That Job was saying, well, he says when he was in his prime, when he was exactly what it sounds like, the prime of his life, because he was going through all this stuff that the enemy's doing to him. But prior to that, when he was living in such close communion with God, it says, when I was in my prime, God's friendship was felt in my home. And I began to just sit there and pray that over my own life, that if you can do this, if you did that for Job in the old covenant, how much more can I receive the same thing in the new covenant? Because it says that the new covenant, it's built upon better promises. We get to receive better in more measure than everyone did in the old covenant based off of the law. But now we get to receive freely because Jesus himself closed that chapter and opened us up to the new covenant to receive from God himself. And so I just began to think, and I was like, Lord, I pray that I can feel your friendship everywhere that I go. And that began to be something that I've been praying every day since I've opened this verse, because it's such a cool concept. And I don't know, I've just been thinking about it, and that I might be the only one that think that's really interesting. But if you go back to verse 1, it says, Job continued speaking, I long for the years gone by when God took care of me, when he lit up the way before me, and I walked safely through the darkness. When I was in my prime, God's friendship was felt in my home. The Almighty was still with me, and my children were around me. Where do I want to go? It keeps going on, and I can read all of this, but it's kind of going to get lost of where I'm going here, my train of thought. But I also read this in the Amplified and Amplified Classic and a couple other versions, and I'll just read that also. It says in King James, it says, "As I was in the days of my youth, when the secret of God was upon my tabernacle." In Amplified, it says, "As I was in the prime of my days, when the friendship and counsel of God were over my tent." So God's friendship, you can be counseled by God Almighty all the days of your life, and it can surround you, and you can know that God's there with you, and you can be in such close communication with God that it's just like any other friend that you're in constant communication with, or you just know that they're always there for you. And to think of God like that, it's not something I always thought of, because I just thought God was just kind of up there in heaven, and I served him here on earth and went to church and did all these things. But I've now realized many years later, and continuing to read the word and continuing to grow in my relationship with God, that God is an ever-present help in time of trouble. So anytime you need God's help, you can call on him, and you can ask whatever you want, with God. And that concept can kind of be like, what's the word I'm looking for? It kind of can be not necessarily ruined, but it can be skewed. That's what the word I was looking for. That concept of asking God for whatever and just communicating with God about everything can kind of be skewed, because then people are like, what if God doesn't give me this, or what if that's not God's will, or whatever, and they get this all mixed up. And that's true, because you have to pray according to the will of God and ask God, because you can't, like, if I ask God for $1 million and I expected, and if there's not $1 million check in my mailbox tomorrow, I'm not gonna say, oh yeah, God's not appearing God. No, I'm gonna say, yeah, I don't even know what I would do with $1 million right now. So God's not gonna give you something you can't handle. But if it's something that God's been preparing you for, it's something that God's been teaching you about, and it's even if something it seems impossible or it seems big, but God's placed this dream in your heart, ask God for it. It says, ask and you will receive. It says, the hungry and thirsty, you shall be filled. So you have to have a want and desire, and just to know God as for who He is. And I've received countless comments, not countless, a few. I don't mean to exaggerate. I've received a few comments on like some YouTube shorts and things about how God is all sufficient and He supplies for all of our needs according to His riches and His glory. And a couple other verses that I've just overall saying that God supplies for every single thing that you need. And I've received in the same on different videos the same type of comments saying that, yeah, God's not a genie in the bottle. You can't just ask God for anything and expect your wishes to come true. The thing is, they don't know, and they're just so limited to thinking that I'm friends with God. God is my Father. We're in close communication, and I'm not asking things just because I want to ask God for them in a way that, let's see if God does this. No. You know that I personally know God supplies all of my needs, all of my desires, because it says in His word, and I've seen Him come through again and again. And that builds trust. And these people that comment on my videos about certain things, I just pray that they open their heart enough and receive the same things that I've received. And that, because their hearts closed, their minds just shut off to what they can receive from God. My mom and I were having this great conversation a couple days ago, and how people don't receive from God because they don't expect it, they don't know it, they are ignorant to it, because they just don't, they're so closed off, they're mentally closed off that God can actually supply for them. And not just like, oh, in the midnight hour God will supply, but no, like, God will supply everything, your every need, because God looks out for you, God cares for you. And you experience that in your life when it's a relationship, because so many people just go to God as their last resort. And the good thing is, God's merciful and God's full of grace, that He will come through for you. If you need to make things right with God, do that, and God will continue to supply for you. But the thing is, people are just closed off to the idea that God will actually supply your needs. God will actually supply your desires. And God will surprise you day after day with opportunity, with great things, because He cares about you and He knows who you are. Job said that God's friendship was felt in his home. What a concept that is. That you can know that God's friendship is all around you. You know that God's around you, that God cares about you. And you know that because you now know God. It's a concept that a lot of people miss, including myself. I didn't really have that full understanding because it didn't go both ways. I knew, like, ethereally that God knew who I was and whatever, but there was never that deep connection knowing that God knows who I am. I know God, and I know His word. And when I read that verse in Job, I was thinking, as I read it today, and I keep thinking about it over and over again, and I was like trying to like think of how that relates to my own life. And I just started to think about when my friends are over at my house. Almost every single Sunday we have dinner at my house, and it's like 6 of us, and it's we're a very tight knit group, and we're like a big family, which I love so much, and everyone's friends with my family. Like all of our families are kind of like not all of our families, but most of our families are like intertwined. But especially at my house, it's become like just like the place we all come to, and it's one of my like favorite things on earth. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about the times that we have all these people over, we're having dinner, and I just like look back sometimes. I just like get like not necessarily emotional, but I just like think of like what a blessing all these people are to my life, and how God's connected us together. And you could just feel like the warmth and the friendship in the room, in the house. And I was thinking about that, and then thinking about how God does the same thing. How God brings you that feeling of not even a feeling, because feelings fade, but just a knowing of God's always there. God knows me. God sees me in every day, in every situation of my life, and I can call on him and he will answer me, and I'm going to hear his voice because he's come through day after day, time after time. And when you think of it like that you just like, that was the best analogy I can come up with to like explain this verse, is like when you like that was it. When we have all these people over and everyone's just having such a great time talking to each other about who knows what, and you can just feel like the friendship in the room. And that Job said that's what he felt in his home, but with God. So how much more can I feel that with God now? Because I live in the new covenant under better promises. So what a blessing that is. So that's my little tidbit of the day, just to leave you with that, because it like warms my heart in the best way. That's the best way I could describe it. And I have nothing else to say for today. I'm quite hungry, if I'm being entirely honest. But it's almost 6. I can almost eat. And things like that. I've read the book of Job before. Never would have caught that. But I believe that as I pray and I fast and I am hungry, I'm putting aside my flesh, and my spirit's just like picking up on things that I wouldn't have realized before. So what a beautiful thing that is, to just tap into the spiritual a little extra these 21 days, and to kickstart and boost my 2026. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. I'm so glad that you tuned in for today, and make sure to come back tomorrow, and I'll see you in the next episode.